Hi everyone. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Fran Halsall. I'm a 3-time Olympian and one of the fastest women ever to swim 50 metres of a swimming pool. And for me, since I've finished swimming, what really interests me is different people's mindsets and how they got to where they got to, why they took the journey there and what drives them to be there. And to see if there's any correlations or differences really between what I did and how I went about it as an elite athlete and how different people in different industries following their certain careers go about it too. So joining me for a conversation on mindset today is Darryl, my friend, good friend of mine. He's a barrister at Byron Street Chambers. He's Deputy High Court Judge. Darryl was called to the bar in '95 and took silk in 2014. And his specialties are personal injury and criminal negligence law. And also, alongside all this that he does in work, he's also got 2 daughters, 2 dogs, and competes in Ironman competition, which for me, just swim one length of a pool, is a ridiculous amount of training to fit around a full-time career at the highest level. So that to me is a sign that Darryl's mindset is very interesting and something I want to pick apart today.
Right, okay, good.
So what I want to talk to you about today, Darryl, is the kind of some insights into how you deal with the courtroom pressures and how you just adapt, changing momentum, changing pace, because everybody in society, like me in my sport, people in jobs everywhere, have to deal with change of pace, adjust, adapt constantly to carry on getting better. And also about motivation, staying motivated, how you've stayed motivated over 25 years of your career.
Say it quickly, Fran, it doesn't sound that bad.
Oh dear. So when I was thinking about what I wanted to talk to you about, I came to the conclusion that, correct me if I'm wrong, what you do in terms of prepping, preparing and performing in a courtroom in some ways is pretty similar to what I did as a sportswoman. Like, there's a lot of prep involved, and then it's bang, it's your time to perform. You've got to nail it, and then that's the decision made. You win or lose, depends on how you perform on the day. Like, talk me through your prep period and how you go about it. Once you've got the case, you know the date's set, you're ready to go. How then, what mindset do you get yourself in to prepare for that? And is the preparation kind of the bit that excites you about it, or is it the performing on the day in the courtroom that is the real buzz about what you do?
Okay, in terms of preparation, it's that there are differences between what we do. So ours is about dates in a diary for a fixed occasion that you work towards over a relatively short period. So there's no baseline level of preparation, of strength preparation or conditioning that go on a journey to peak at that point that's over months or years. It's over a short window to be ready for that occasion, that day, and that challenge. So there is a difference. However, in terms of preparation, it is time, application, concentration, and absorbing all of that information that you need to have to be ready to present your case, to respond to a case, and to try and persuade somebody to reach a particular outcome. So when I look at it that way, yeah, it's well, the other difference is you're not just doing that one thing. It's not concentrating on that one occasion, because in the 2 or 3 weeks leading up to a court case, there will be meetings I have to go to, there are other clients I have to advise, where on that occasion I have to perform a different role for them to the same standard and the same level as I would my hearing, the trial that might have got to do that. So it is juggling all of those commitments and combining being prepared for different challenges on different days, but knowing at the end of it, there is the court case, the trial, the hearing that I've got to be ready for, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It really does. But so when you first started out, I know you were the first person in your family to go to university, weren't you?
Correct.
And so obviously the first person to actually study law. So do you think you had all these attributes to be able to prepare, to like juggle multiple things going on at once? Is that something that you knew you had as a skill, like before you decided what you wanted to do as a career, or is it something that you've kind of mastered and learned throughout your career along the way to make you better?
I've never really thought about it, but now that you say it, I always had at school, I tell my eldest daughter, who, they're both bright girls, but in particular at the moment, she's going for her GCSEs and thinks she's going to get very good results. I got all A's in my GCSEs and all A's in my A-levels, which I do remind her of. However, perhaps what that demonstrates is I was good at a range of subjects. And if I was good at a range of subjects, that meant I could juggle learning or applying myself to different subjects at the same time in order to get good results in an exam. So maybe from an early age, I was able to cope well with absorbing lots of information in different subjects and understanding it and being able to apply myself. So probably that's a skill that I need to have now. I think anyone who does my job has to have the ability to absorb, retain, understand and analyse large amounts of information on different subjects in different contexts, all around the same time. You know, we can have 3 or 4 big meetings on big cases where there are different issues, different evidence, different information. Just say, think about it, probably one of my core abilities is being able to do that, which then translates into how I do my job.
That's really interesting. I like that. That's a good answer. Very good. I'm really interested, like literally, because for me, it was basically you're focusing on one thing, you've got one goal, and there's little bits here and there in between it in the middle that you kind of have to think about as small stepping stones, but it isn't like a different thing that's taking me in a different direction, if that makes sense. So it's all focused on one thing, which is really, for me, it's quite easy then, isn't it, just to stay in one focused mindset and it's all about that one thing. Whereas with what you do, it's a lot of juggling, basically. So how do you manage that? Is that like a just really bloody got to be diligent on your time management? You have to set about every day, you know the structure to your day. Is it long days, you just got to put the work until it's done? Is it, I know on this day I need to be here, so the day before I need to do this? Is it you're constantly always ticking over what the process is?
Yeah, I think there's a few things. First of all, it's knowing what you've got on the horizon. So what is in your diary? Because you have to be ready for that. You can't walk into, if somebody's there who's had a life-changing injury, they expect you to know every detail. If you don't know the detail, then you're not going to have their trust and confidence. So when you walk in, you've absolutely got to be ready for them, and you've got to be ready for the next person the next day, and you've got to be ready for the judge on a Friday. You can't turn up and say, can I just give me another hour because I've just not quite finished reading. So knowing what your commitments are and then allocating the time to be ready for each one, because you have to perform at each one. They're not a world championship that, in literal terms, they're not the pinnacle of my year in terms of what I've worked towards. But for that person on that day, that's probably the most important meeting they've got, certainly that day, that week. And a series of meetings in a client in a big case, those are key meetings to them, and you've absolutely got to be ready and on top of your game for that, because they need you to be. And so, and so in terms of the background, you're always carrying it around with you. You have downtime, but a friend of mine used to call it the shaving mirror moments or the dog walking moments, which is you're not at work, but you're thinking about a particular problem, a particular challenge, something you've just done. Does it need to be done differently? Do you have to go back to it? Something you've got to do. It is that constant thought of work you've got on, and is there anything I can or need to be doing, perhaps just to get ready for it or to perfect what I've done.
So in terms of well, my performance was all for me, about me. Everything was very internal focused. You obviously then have to balance with what you do, the feelings, emotions, and expectations of your client. And in the cases that you do, it's quite an emotional topic, isn't it? If you've been injured,
Yeah.
really badly injured, and you can't do what you're used to doing, that's massive amount of emotion. How do you like deal with that interaction, and how do you kind of separate it but still treat them like they need to be treated, because it is an emotional thing and if they are feeling emotional about it? Do you have to get yourself, when you go to these meetings, in a certain mindset that I've got to balance being sympathetic and understanding the emotion, but then there's the logical aspect to it too? That's like really interesting and hard to...
Well, there's one distinction to make, is I don't only act for the injured person or their family. Sometimes I act for the insurance company who's got to compensate them. So that side of the job, it's the same role, but it doesn't have that emotional layer to it, or it doesn't have the same emotional layer to it, and I'll come on to that. But in terms of how I go about it, the best tip I ever got was, because people say, oh, how do you cope with all of these sad cases where, you know, people suffer devastating injuries or there's a fatality? And the one thing I hold to is, I'm not responsible for what happened. I had nothing to do with that. My role is part of their journey. So I'm hopefully only part of a positive, of taking them from where they are to where they want to get to, insofar as a claim for compensation can achieve that. So I see my role very positively rather negatively, which helps. In terms of balancing logic and pressure, well, my role is to advise, to analyse, to put together a strategy and to present a case. It's not a mechanical role, but that's devoid of emotion, save for there's a you communicate with anybody, whether it's your class level, but that's not loaded with drama or emotion in that sense. So that's quite easy to process. The tricky bit, I think, within your question that we have is the sense of responsibility. You know, it is, if I get this right, I could make a big difference, but I've got sometimes big decisions to make or advise somebody on life-changing decisions. And it's, if we get those wrong, the effect is not for me, the effect is for them.
Yeah, yeah. Is that why you did it? Is that why you got into it?
There's pressure and there's responsibility. Is that what? No, I stumbled into what I do. I wanted to go and become a barrister. I knew that. In terms of my area, I started off wanting to do crime. Most people, when they think about it, think of being a criminal practitioner. I did work experience in the Crown Court in Manchester. It looked great. Over time, I drifted into the sort of work that I do now and specialise in. Whether it picked me or I picked it, or it's a bit of both, I don't know, but it fits my skills. I feel very comfortable with it. I think it's the right fit for me.
Are you competitive with it?
I'm competitive insofar as I want to be as good as I can possibly be, and I would like to think that people feel I am good at what I do. But there's no competition in terms of, you know, winning more than one of my colleagues or winning more cases than somebody in another set of chambers. It just doesn't work like that. You can't benchmark yourself by how many cases you win. The only benchmark is, are you doing the biggest cases? Are you doing the most complex cases? If you're in and around the bracket of people doing that, then yes, I'm competitive. I want to be in that space, but I don't measure myself by reference to what other people doing my sort of work are doing.
That's good, because, well, that's what I always tried to do when I was swimming as well. Like, I don't want to, like, I'm nobody else. Nobody else has got my skill set. Nobody else could swim how I swam. So my whole preparation was around making me as good as I could be. And then on the day, it was just executing the skills that I had, and nobody else could interfere with those skills. Nobody else could like give or take anything away from what I could then step up and do. So when it came to a race day for me, it was very much, right, I need to get in my headspace and think about me, how I'm going to perform and what I'm going to do. And that, I think, for a court day for you, I assume is similar in that sense. Obviously, there's differences in that there's a lot going on in a courtroom. There is actually a lot of like different influences. There's different things going on that you can't control. So for me, there was a lot of stuff that I could control and only focused on that. For you, how do you deal with the things that you can't control, like who's your opposing like counsel, who's the person judging? You can't control those things. So how do you go about dealing with all the things that you can't control in that environment?
Yeah, I think that the one that I was thinking about this and our similarities and differences in terms of your sporting career and how you prepare and perform in mine. And I think the big difference for me is, you know, knowing what numbers you could do perhaps in training, you would know if I turn up and I do what I can do, then I'm going to win, or I see I'm going to be in the top 3, whatever it is. And what goes on in the lane either side of me, I have no control over, other than I just get out and go as fast as I can go. For me, there's a limit to what I can do. Success for me is very much about influencing the behaviour of others. So communicating and to say things properly that I need them to say, or force them to say something I need them to say, or to persuade a judge. And there's so many variables with that I have no real control over. I think that is a difference. In terms of how do I prepare for it, well, first of all, your level of preparation. The more you know, the more comfortable you are with the detail, the better prepared you are for, and not just the detail, the bigger picture, because you're trying to communicate and persuade. That's trying to influence somebody's thinking. That means you have to strike a connection with them and communicate in a way that's meaningful to them, that doesn't get them offside, perhaps addresses some of their concerns, all of those things. So it's really thinking through to the fullest possible extent and trying to anticipate what that might they think about that. How can I reassure them about that? How can I deflect them from that? How can I focus their attention on this? It's thinking about all of those things is all part of my preparation for that exercise. And that's what I can do. And then it's listening. You know, you said about, I think when we were chatting, this is a conversation. A conversation is not just about speaking, it's about listening. So being very alive to what is going on around me to then influence whether I go down a particular road that I was planning on going down, or do I change tack? Do I completely change, or do I adjust? All of those things. So it's being very reactive to what's going on.
And talking about adjusting, obviously we've spoken about the momentum changes during a case and what's going on, and having to deal with those momentum changes and you have to adapt and do it in a very quick time frame. Whereas, like, I suppose a lot of people have to deal with change momentum in every job, really, isn't it? Like, one day you can smash it, have a great day, everybody's on board, you're taking everybody with you that you work with, and we're all on this journey together. The next minute, like, everybody's down, like, carrying on, not enjoying themselves, don't want to be at work. And how do you, in that kind of small amount of time, judge and gauge momentum and know which direction to go in with it? Is it a head thing? You can see it, you're just really emotionally intelligent and it's an innate skill that you have. It's something that over times of it going wrong and you learning from it, that you've been able to adapt and adjust quicker and know your skills better now to deal with it quicker?
Yeah, I think the thing I've learned over time is that if you feel as though something's starting to slip away, or if you think it's starting to go well, whatever it is, when you feel that there's a problem or there's a change of momentum in a situation, it's just to stop and think. To stop and actually just pause for 10 or 15 seconds to think rather than leap in. It feels like an eternity, but nobody else feels it's anything other than a legitimate short mini break. That's all it is. I think people are problematic. To stop and think about what you are going to do is a good thing. And in a situation of being a part of a team, I think it's good leadership. I think it shows that you are thinking about what to do next rather than just leaping in. So there's a degree of instinct to it. Of course there is, in terms of communication. It's reading people and reading situations. But if it's a really problematic moment that calls for careful thought, then give it that thought. You don't win prizes for rushing in with the wrong answer. You do win prizes for the right answer. And if that takes you 20, 30 seconds to get there, that's 20 or 30 seconds well spent.
That's like really good advice. I need to take more of that. Take more of a pause, more of a breath before then actually delivering my thoughts on things.
It is. And you know, when you're in a meeting, I had one particular colleague who's retired, but he wouldn't say very much in a meeting. And when he did, there would be a short pause while he thought about things, but everybody wanted to hear what he had to say. The person who leaps in at every opportunity and just comes out with a stream of consciousness, we all switch off to them, don't we?
Yeah, very true. I need to take a leaf out of that book for sure.
Oh, yeah. I'm not positive, Frank. I'm not saying anything.
So talk to me about what's going on in Darryl Allen's head on the day where you know this is make or break, I need to stand up and deliver today. So for me, like, I got nervous on a day where I had to race. It's part of the job. Like, you accept it, you embrace it. I didn't see nerves and like as a bad thing. I didn't feel like it was an anxious nerves. I knew that the nerves were excitement, wanting to perform and knowing that it was my time to be able to do so. But I had kind of a process that was just for me, that was really bespoke to me, that I went through on a day, that I said to myself, that put me in the right mindset to be able to deliver what I know I needed to do. Do you kind of go through similar emotions, or is it very much like, no, I am the ice man?
Yeah, it's not that. It feels very intense. So the one when it's at its most intense is if you're doing a big trial and a long trial. So if you're in that, then it is very intense. It's all consuming because you're juggling everything that's going on and you're trying to focus on what's happening on that day, bearing in mind it has implications for days 5, 6, 7, and so on. So you're immersed in it. You're thinking about it a lot. It is the real dog walk moment. You might go for a dog walk, but you are rehearsing in your head what you're going to say that day. You're thinking through, what if this happens? What if they say that? So it is very intense. It's not for me, it's not a quiet calm of listening to classical music, then taking my headphones out and then performing. It is thinking about it all the time, getting ready. Interestingly, and again, is this the difference between our two positions? When I watch swimmers, they walk out poolside, they've got headphones in and they're shut out to everybody else. In a case you're part of a team, you can't shut them all out. My client doesn't want to be shut out on an important day. My solicitor doesn't want to be shut out. You're having to interact and communicate and work.
Are you aware of that? Are you aware of kind of like how you're speaking to other people, how you're acting, how you're carrying yourself as part of that team? Or is that just doesn't come into play? Because as you said, when the swimmer comes out, you're very much in your zone, in your will. But there is kind of a subconscious aspect of you're walking taller, your shoulders are back, you've got like a more of an icy look on your face because you're kind of mirroring the mannerisms of what you want to do to be able to perform. So is it like, because you know that this is a team, and how I hold myself, how I speak, like even the words, some of the words that I say, if I get these wrong, it could take my team in one direction and not the others. Are you aware of that at all? Or is it just something that you don't even think about? You just know that you're all there as a team and in it together?
No, very, very aware of it. I'm paid for them not to worry. So I have to, all of those things I worry about, I have to deal with them, I make decisions, or I delegate, I don't do everything, but the buck stops with me. And if I, turn up worried about or nervous about what's happened the day before, or nervous about what's going to happen, that's not good for everybody around me. So I don't want to confuse it with being foolishly optimistic and just ignoring the realities. You have to be realistic and you have to be aware, but you have to you've got to be the calm presence, perhaps when other people are feeling nervous and worried, because they don't need you to be worried. They need you to be on it. And if there's a problem, you can acknowledge a problem and say, yeah, but we can deal with that. I need to do X, Y, and Z. I need to do A, B, C, and we can deal with that. So let's not worry about it. Let's move on to this.
So you basically leave your chimp at the door. Like, I know we've talked about chimps before, and my chimp Jean could hijack me on a performance day when it wanted to. Like, it sounds like you have to be in human logic mode all the way through to be able to get the best outcome for everybody. Is that just like, I had to learn that. It took me a while to learn that skill throughout my career. Like, sometimes my chimp would be on board, ready, let's do this, and be fine. But other times I really had to talk it round. Like, I'd get in my warm up and it'd be saying to me, oh, you feel tired, oh, like you feel sluggish, your arms are a bit heavy here. But logically, there was no chance I could be tired. Like, I've done hardly any load of training that week, so my arms can't be tired. Yeah. So I have to talk myself round to not being in this, like, letting my chimp and these thoughts take over. Is that something that you've worked on, or something that is taught to you, or is it something that you've just developed? You know that that's how you need to be, so you get into that, I don't know, performance before you go into the room? Yeah,
it's the one that, so that work-wise, the chimp I struggle with is perhaps becoming angry or frustrated or upset that, for example, that's not fair. How that's going right now, that's not right, that's not fair. And it only occasionally comes out, and we learn early on, and you do perfect, or you develop over time, as an appreciation of, I can't win everything. If that happens, that's the judge's view, that's the way the evidence has gone, I've done my best about it. Dwelling on it and being fueled by anger, well, that just translates in, I'm now going to communicate with you badly. So I'm now probably going to display my frustration with perhaps how you've ruled on something or how you've dealt with something, and that's going to affect our relationship. So my prospects of persuading you on the next issue to agree with me are now just going to go down. So it really is deep breath, that's that, put that in a box, and then just move on to what I need to do. So it's just very much focusing on, is just letting that go and focusing on what I need to do.
Do you need to give yourself, like, do you tell yourself this? Is it something that you go, I'm getting frustrated with this, right, I need to let this go? Or is it just, it's become that, like, routine now that it just happens?
Well, it doesn't happen often, just because you've got to the position of, this is the system, the way it works. I'm not going to win, every occasion. If the judge is against me, then the judge is against me. Where you have points of dispute, there are differing views, and it's reasonable, provided the judge has listened, thought about what I've had to say, and produced a logical analysis. I might not agree, but provided that sorts it, well, that's fine. That's his or her job, and I have to accept that. That's what the system's based upon. When it does creep in, I do occasionally have to tell myself, you calm down, take a breath, draw a line under it. It is very much if I can draw a line under it with somebody and say, okay, well, that's probably something we're going to disagree on. I understand your position. I'll now move on to X. It really is literally a line under it and move away from it and just let it go. And I do sometimes have to make that happen to then move on.
So after a big important case, like the ruling's happened, what is the process for you after it? Because it's like a process of up and down. You've got to be on it. Like, I assume it's tiring afterwards. Like, you feel everything just go woof because you've been like in the mindset that you need to perform. So after a big competition, I would need to take time to relax and mentally recharge. And I think that's like a really important part of performing well and performing at a high standard, is taking the time after something that's been big to get yourself back into the right frame of mind and not be scared to take that time. So how would you deal with a big win and a big loss in the courtroom?
Okay, so the stages to that. First of all, 99 times out of 100, at the end of something big, you don't get the result there and then. So you might finish it on the end of week 2 on the Friday, and the judge says, right, I'll give you my ruling in 8 to 10 weeks.
What are you thinking about during that then? Are you having to manage the client's expectations? Are you having to touch base with them regularly? Are you like having to start other bits in that time? Like, what's the...
You're onto other bits. You know, the ideal scenario might be you finish on a Friday, you then got the weekend. If you think it's gone well, for taking stages, first of all, whenever you finish something like that, I think it's important to just decompress it a bit with your team. Everyone's worked through that with you. Whether it's going out for a drink, whatever it is, there is that element, because you've all been working phenomenally hard together and you've done your work. So that's important. Then, if you're lucky it's on a Friday, you've got the weekend, you might, rest, relax. But come Monday, you are doing something else. You are into another meeting. You might not be back into court for 2 weeks, but you'll be maybe in a settlement meeting. And that settlement meeting is just as important to that one person as that trial was to the other. So you are back at it. It's rare to be able to say, I'll just have 2 weeks off, maybe working and recovering, because it's not, whilst it's physically draining, and yes, there's a lot of adrenaline and it's tiring, not to the same extent as elite sport. And so you
do sports, because I know you train regularly. Do you train regularly as your decompressing time? Is that your time? Definitely. Just relax, me time. I get back into a good place mentally. You use training and exercising as that, whereas obviously I didn't use training and exercise as that. No. Okay.
It is, and that's the interesting thing, isn't it? So training and exercise and all of that for me is something to put me in a good place. It's not, all right, it's for the sake of it in terms of doing a triathlon and you're working towards a goal and you want to perform in a certain way, but it is part of me giving myself balance. So after something big, to be able to go out and go on a bike, do some training, do something like that, that's a good thing that helps get me back into a good place and back on track, perhaps whilst I've been coping with the worry or the stress of what I've been working on.
Do you go back and look over what happened, what you did well during the trial, what you didn't do well, what could have been done differently? Or is once it's done, it's settled and just move straight on to the next one?
No, at the end of the day, probably mentally, there is a gap at the end of each day before you start prepping again. You might have a meeting with your team straight away, so it's not them, and you start work later that evening, whether it's when you're driving home in the car, whether it's if you don't go have a meeting with your team afterwards and it's your own downtime, whenever it is, I think about those sort of things a lot. I probably beat myself up about mistakes I feel I've made, perhaps pat myself on the back and I think I've got something particularly right. I'll always reflect on how something has gone. Could I have done it better? Did I nail it? And if I did, why did that go particularly well? Also, did somebody else do something that I thought, God, that was really good? Or conversely, oh gosh, I think I do that, and that was shocking. So I do process that a lot, because the way we learn and the way we develop is we don't have coaches. There is no training program. If you follow, you get to level X. You've got to be thinking and looking about how can I improve all the time.
That's an interesting one, because after a competition, like no matter the results, I can always debrief with a coach. So I've got somebody's input and information from them that I value to bounce off. Do you look anywhere else for those kind of communications and somebody to bounce stuff off in terms of, this happened, I dealt with it like this, or this happened? Is there like anybody in your remix? I know, like, being on the top of your game, being a CEO, being an entrepreneur, it's quite a lonely existence really, because who do you turn to for advice? Who do you speak to? Is it all internally? Is it a lot of reading? Is it a lot of just asking yourself the questions and figuring it out? What process do you go through for that?
Yeah, there's well, if you're talking about actual performance, so who are the people who can comment? Your clients, your lay clients, well, they might have an instinctive feel as to whether it was good or bad, but they've got no benchmark. My solicitors, yeah, I'll ask them, but they're probably conscious of their communication with me. They might be a bit reluctant to say, I think you got that badly wrong, Darryl, you should have done it differently, because they feel that's not what I want to hear. I'm not going to ask the judge because we're in the middle of a hearing. My opponent, might they comment? Well, I'm not going to ask them for it. So it's very difficult to get feedback about something you've done from those that are there actually to witness it. The feedback you only usually get is when it's really good. So someone says, oh, that was really well done, Darryl, that was fantastic. And whilst that's useful, you can probably feel that yourself. The feedback you need.
Like, because I know that when people said to me, oh, that was a good swim, I'd be like, yeah, it was okay. Because ultimately I had long-term goals, and I assume you've got career long-term goals that you still want to achieve and still going for. So when people said, oh, you're a good swimmer, you're doing good at that, that's good, I was like, yeah, it's fine, but didn't really look into it, celebrate it, because I still knew there's things I needed to change, things I needed to put right, and things I needed to do differently to achieve my actual long-term goal. So like, when people are giving you good feedback and like, yeah, that's good, do you take it on board? Do you like embrace it, or do you kind of...
I do take it on board, because it gives you some reassurance that you're getting, you're doing things right. That the way that you do things, people do think, yeah, that worked, that was good, that was successful. And you can measure it because you know whether a hearing's gone well or not. You know whether a meeting's gone well. You just know. You know whether, have I managed that well? Have I communicated well? And have the people I've worked with come away thinking that was a really productive good use of our time to get to where we want to be? And you just know whether that's been achieved or not. So it doesn't need the positive feedback. The positive feedback is reassuring. The more valuable feedback is when somebody says, you know what, you did it that way, and that's one way, but you might want to think of perhaps doing it this other way. Because I'm not saying one's right or wrong, but just try this one, because what I've seen is that can work for these reasons. And that's how we train really junior practitioners on what to do. You give them constructive feedback. You tell them, perhaps you show them what they did. You tell them why perhaps that was problematic. You give them an explanation as to why perhaps we shouldn't do that. And then you make practical suggestions on how they might do it differently next time for them to be able to do that. Once you get to 25 years in the job, people aren't telling you that. And so that's the feedback you need, but it's very difficult to get.
Yeah.
And as you say about CEOs, they're the sort of people who look for perhaps people in other industries for advice or for suggestions, because their team, you're not going to tell the boss that he's doing something badly. Perhaps you should do, but it's not the sort of communication they often get. But that's the feedback that's probably more constructive than saying, oh God, that was great, well done.
Do you think because the learning process that you went through as a junior of, why don't you try this? That's a good way of doing it, but try that. So you're always adapting, adjusting, trying, and then throwing out if it didn't work. That's something that's learned and taught early. And you embrace that. That's why you're good at what you do now. Because for me, I find in sport, you have to adapt, you have to adjust, you have to try new things. If they don't work, yeah, it can be a major mess up, but then you've tried it, you've stricken it off, but you have to make those calls, you have to try. And I think you don't get better until you do try everything and figure out what's the best route for you. So do you think that that training is really important and that kind of helped you be successful?
I do. The thing that helped me be successful most of all was teaching. So actually becoming a trainer to train junior practitioners on what to do makes you look at what you do a lot more. Once you immerse yourself in, if you move away from, oh, well, some people have either got it or they've not, it's a natural thing, you're either a good advocate or you're not. There's a science to it, there's a logic, there are things that you can do to improve your performance. And once you start to learn about how you train people to do it, you then look at what you do. And not only do you look at what you do, you look at what other people do. And so all the time, if I'm not immersed in the detail of what's going on, it is good to look at what an opponent's doing, or somebody in a case, somebody might be on the same side as you and how they're doing something, and thinking to yourself, well, that was really good. I'll borrow that. Or, gosh, I know I do that and it doesn't come across quite well. The other thing is, sitting as a judge, you get to see people trying to persuade you. Our job is all about persuasion, and you get to see good things and you get to see bad things, and that then informs what you do. So it is the constantly looking to try and improve and always being alive to. I'm not perfected it yet. I am learning all of the time. Every colleague who I rate and respect will say they are constantly learning and improving. And you do that by watching, by listening, and thinking about what you do.
Yeah, definitely. And you've been doing it now, well, for 25 years, yeah. Which is over double my sporting career, that is, Darryl. But even so, 10 years of swimming, everybody thinks that athletes are the most motivated people. They're always motivated. Oh, you must have been motivated to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and dive in a freezing cold swimming pool. And most of the time I wasn't motivated to go and dive in a swimming pool at 5 o'clock in the morning. And what I realised for me is that I knew that I just knew I had to do it. I had to do it. I had to do that session because I had my goal and my outcome. So after 25 years of doing what you do, how do you stay motivated, or how do you get yourself up to do it? And what do you think is important in getting up to do it? I always think that commitment, I'm basically committed. I've just got to commit myself today to do it, is what I said to myself. And that was my mindset when I was actually, I've got my dog snuggling next to me, it's 5 o'clock, it's freezing cold, I don't really want to get out of bed, but I've just got to commit to doing this. Once it's done, it's done. I've got that in the bag and I can move on to the next one. It wasn't always about the motivation. Even at racing, I could go to a big competition and not feel motivated. So for me, I took everything that I did was just commit. So you've had a long career, if you don't mind me saying. There's going to carry on into another 25 years of being successful. But what motivates you to keep going and getting up? And when you don't have days where you want to get up and go, what do you do to actually force yourself or get into the day and do what you need to do?
Yeah, okay. Well, I enjoy what I do. There are days that I don't, but I do enjoy what I do. I enjoy the intellectual challenge. I like the human contact. I like having the opportunity to do what I do. And if I want to be doing it at that level, then to be doing it at that level means, you say commit. John's line to me when I was doing a lot of training was, just get it done. You've just got to get up and you've got to get it done. Whether it was a long bike ride or a run, or it's getting ready for a meeting, you have to get up and you get it done. And so that's it. There's some days, I'm absolutely super motivated. Some days it is just a process of, I have to do this. I have to get it done. It's not optional. I can't decide, oh, well, perhaps I won't prepare. I have to get it done and be ready. There are days when I'm absolutely not motivated. And I think it's important to recognize those days. I was chatting to a friend before and he was saying, you've got to avoid that risk of just being at your desk because you feel you need to be there to be working. if you're not in the right place to work productively, then you perhaps need to come away and come back when you are ready to get it done. And for me, I'm somebody who gets up very early. I'd rather work early in the morning. I don't have superhuman hours. I'm not still awake at 10 o'clock. I'll probably be fast asleep on the sofa. But it's finding my best window of time. And if at 7 o'clock I can't face doing something on the night before, I'll get up at 3:30, 4 o'clock and get it done then. So it's getting on with it, because I know I need to do it to perform in the way that I want to perform and to be at the level I want to be at, but also appreciating I can't do that 365 days of the year. And it's knowing when to accept I'm not in the right place to do, be working on something, but then come back to it.
So you kind of, do you reckon it's to do with goals as well? Like I take it you do have goals that you want to achieve, or is it because you have deadlines to things and it's in your psyche that I need to hit these deadlines and that's important to me? Or is it, I've got this long-term goal where I want to be in my career, what I want to do, and to do that, I just have to admit it.
Yeah, in terms of career goals, there aren't that many that I've still got. I've got to, in my day job being a barrister, where I want to get to. In a judicial career, well, is there something there? Maybe, maybe not, I don't know. But it's not like progression in terms of there's an appointment, I can get to board level, or I get to be a director, or I get to a CEO. That's just not there. There's no other level for me to go beyond, in terms of appointment, where I am, apart from judicial, and querying whether I go down that road. So in terms of goals, it's wanting to be and to remain in that tier at the top of my profession in what I do. It's still wanting to be in that bracket is what motivates me. And so therefore, you have to be performing well in each of your cases, because if you keep doing that, then you retain the work that you've got, you get new work, you get bigger work, you get the more complex work, and you're just in and around that level. If you back off and function at 60 or 70%, well, you won't be in that top tier. And if you don't want to be in that top tier, that's fine. I'm not saying everybody has to be, but I do want to be. The big question you would ask is, what drives me to want to be in that top tier? And I don't know, that's too deep.
Well, I did a lot of insights into values and what I value. And as an athlete, you value, self-improvement. That is one of my key core values as a human being, is self-improvement. And I think that, and part of that is what motivated me just to get up and get it done every day, was the fact that, okay, this is just me and my values. Like, one of my values is honesty. Like, I can't stand people not being honest with me. I wouldn't even tell a white lie. So if you ever took me to court, Darryl, I would be the most honest person.
You'd be a great witness.
But I think when you have a sense of and know what your innate values are and what they are as a person, it doesn't actually then have to translate into, I've got this goal and that's why I do it, is it? It's just, so if you just really, really, and one of your values is, I want to help people to the best of my ability, then that'll probably make you good at your career. Like, there's different ones that's all different for different people, but mine is, I found out through being an athlete, was betterment, I suppose, for want of a better word. And that's what, when I was having like a crap day, and when I was having a day where it was like, no, training is not happening, I'm basically swimming through maple syrup today, this is awful, that it was, no, this is fine, I can swim through the maple syrup, because I can see at the end of it, I'm making myself better, and that's what I value, and that's what's important to me. But it took me a while to realise that. I thought I only trained to just race and win, and that was quite a while. It took me quite a while to understand that actually, no, Fran, that's not you, that's Jean again. That's the chimp thinking. you ever like think, no, I'll do that because that's actually truly what I believe and what I value? And would you, so like more of a gut feeling? I watched a thing on the vagus nerve, and it's basically your head, your heart, and your gut, and like it suggests that successful people just kind of have a gut feeling or reaction that I would call values, I suppose, but like that you go, no, actually, I need to do this, I need to do that, or oh no, I shouldn't do that. And do you think that because how you've got to where you've got to and the mindset that you have is very much like some of it is an innate kind of journey and things that you just kind of know and feel?
Yeah, I think if you're talking about values, then, well, one's the value. You said at the beginning I was the first in my family to go to university, and that's right. And I was surrounded by my parents and grandparents might not have gone to university, but they had a phenomenal work ethic. You work hard. It's what you do. Whatever it is you do, you work hard. My grandfather was a boilermaker, but boy, did he work hard at it. It's a physical, hard job, but he did it. He went there 6 days a week. You get up and you get on with it. So hard work is a trait I think I do have, and a value that I do have. That if you work hard, then that will be rewarded in some sense, whether it's financial, whether it's acknowledgement that you do a good job, whether it's appreciation, whatever it is. People who work hard, I think, are generally rewarded for that. It's not universal, but so hard work is something I value. In terms of the driver for it on those days, that whether it's a positive or a negative, I want to do well. At school, I wanted to do well. I didn't want to get good results. I wanted to get the best results in my class.
So you are competitive then?
I am, aren't I? Yeah. I do want to be, but I recognise that I do have the insight that I can't necessarily be that. And it might not be achievable, but being the best that I can be and doing the best I possibly could do still drives me. That's the church.
That's telling us. That's all good. Like, actually, mine are going to go off now too. Now that yours have gone, ours are 2 minutes late here. I can't structure my day by the church bells at church cottages because I'd be way off my timings.
Well, ours are bang on. Is that 12 o'clock? I bet it is.
Well, because I have kept you quite a while. Like, just one last thing I'd like to finish on. Obviously, we talked a lot about what motivates like us, what like the ability to adapt and kind of staying motivated, like the pressures of the courtroom, the ups and downs, that kind of stuff. But there's a lot of talk around soft skills right now, and I'm a big believer in soft skills are as important as anything. So what kind of transferable skill would you say has helped you to be successful? And you think that if you're going to talk to Ari and Mima, what you'd say, this is a great skill to have. This will send you on any path that you want to do. This will be a skill that will help you get there.
There's two. To be good with people. You can be a great book learner, you can be super bright, you can have lots of great analytical skills, but if you can't work with people, then it's not an absolute barrier, but you'd be the exception that breaks through. Of course, is going to be the genius who doesn't interact well with people, but the ability to work with people, emotional intelligence, to empathise, to understand, to communicate well, I think that is invaluable, whatever you do. The other one is, if I had to give them one specific skill or suggestion, it would be the ability to communicate and persuade, to be able to communicate complex ideas in simple language, to communicate them in simple terms, to enable people to understand is a great skill. Whether you're doing a conference audience, whether you're speaking to a judge in a courtroom, whether you're sat in a one-to-one meeting, perhaps in a difficult meeting with something that's gone out at work, if you can communicate well, perhaps something that's difficult, sensitive, or complex in simple terms, and then listen to what they've got to say and communicate in almost a conversational, relaxed way, I think that's a great skill to have, whatever you do.
I agree. That's
Good.
that was great, and thank you so much for your time today, Darryl. I know that you're a busy man, and you've probably got lots of work that you're behind on now from talking to me. But
no, my good time management is I've allocated time for this. I'm okay.
Perfect. Well, have a good afternoon, and I'll speak to you soon.
Good stuff. Well done, Fran. Thanks for that.
Thank you. Bye.